Hello, everybody, and welcome to Bearded Things. This is a new show, and we've done a couple of sample episodes. We're doing a full rollout tonight. We're going to try some features, see how they play along. You need to let us know. You can do that by reaching me. My name is Chris, by the way, at the Christopher Alton on Instagram. That's the best place to find me. And with my broski.
How's it going? My name is Tyler Wiggins. You can also find me on the Instagram at not the Christopher Alton, but it is at the Hamburglar, DAHAMBURGLUR.
And that's a long one.
It's a very long one. That's what she said.
Hey, so we're going to be doing a couple of things before we get into our show. Tyler, how have you been? What's going on? What's new? Tell me all about it.
I have been good. Living the dream, living the retail manager life here in COVID-19 crazy pandemic world. Waiting to see if the governor in California is going to shut us down, if we're going to stay open, kicking people out of my store left and right because they're not wearing masks. If you're out there, please wear a mask in public. You're just trying to save us.
Yeah, don't be a mask hole. Just put the stupid thing on.
Yeah, it's not hard. I wear it, 8 to 10 hours a day. Like, please just wear it. Like, it's really not that hard. If you're coming in, you're going to be in the store for 5-10 minutes. You're going to go outside. You're going to run to McDonald's, to Carl's Jr., wherever you're going. Just wear a mask. It's just, help us out, please. Try to stop this pandemic. Some of us would like to be able to go outside and enjoy public again at some point in our lifetimes.
What is public?
It's this mythical thing that we used to have it back in the day where you could go outside and you could be next to your friends, you could drink, you could have fun. And now it's all gone. We have to wear masks. We have to stay 6 feet away from each other. It just, it was better times.
Yeah. And in my neck of the world, I am an out-of-work actor, so nothing has changed at all for me. This is completely normal. So welcome. If you ever had that dream of like chasing Hollywood or whatever, this is pretty much all that it is. Once in a while you go out because somebody wants to judge you, and then that's it. So yeah. You're technically all actors now, too.
Congratulations.
We have a couple of topics tonight. One thing that we're doing, and I think is actually be kind of fun for everybody, is we don't actually know what each other's going to be covering tonight.
Surprise!
So I, without getting into too much detail, mine has to do with a particular event in American history.
Wow, that's very specific, Chris. Thank you. What are we going to do?
Do you want to give any teasers? You just want to jump into it?
No, that's fine. Do you want me to tease mine?
If you'd like. I mean, do you want to go first? If you go first, I don't think you should tease because we're just jumping in.
But I like to tease.
All right, tease. Let it go.
No, I don't. I mean, if I'm going first, it doesn't matter. But I can give a slight tease. Mine is a very specific person that happened in American history.
There's been like 6 billion people in the United States, so this will be good.
No, it's a specific one, though. Think about it.
So it's one of the 6 billion.
One of the 6 billion that have covered the United States.
That's awesome. All right. So, do you want to go first?
No, yeah, I don't mind. Yeah, I'll win the coin toss.
Go for it.
The imaginary pandemic coin toss here. So, hello, lovely viewers or listeners. We're not on a visual medium. We're an audio medium. Come on, Tyler, get it together. So I'm going to cover something that's kind of been sort of in the news recently. It was something that came out about 5 years ago, and now it's really popular because Disney Plus just released the musical Hamilton on Disney. Or Disney released the music Hamilton on Disney Plus. I'm good at speaking, people. So kind of, it's really cool. If you haven't seen the movie or you haven't gone to the play, it's the story of Alexander Hamilton told in a little bit of creative licensing from Lin-Manuel Miranda, who is amazing. He's a jerk. I hate how much I love that guy. I was like, I will fight you right now. I love everything he's done. He composes music. He's done stuff for like Moana and different movies and stuff like that. He starred in a couple, there's a TV show, I think it was on Showtime or Star or something. He was the main character on. He's amazing. So he took some creative licensing, based it on, the biography by Ron Chernow, who did the biographical novel for Hamilton. If you haven't seen it, it's amazing. Chris, I think you went and saw it in person, correct?
Yeah, I saw the OBC, the original Broadway cast of Hamilton forever ago. but it is really good. And I mean, everything's on hold right now, but if you get a chance to go see the touring company, you need to go do it. It's amazing.
Yeah, I was never fortunate enough to go and watch it because I couldn't afford tickets. So I was on the super late train, and I only got to experience Hamilton. Excuse the motorcycle that's driving in the background.
There's always a motorcycle.
Always a motorcycle. Every podcast has to have a motorcycle driving in the background. So I wasn't able to see the show live, but I did get to watch it on Disney Plus, and I've probably watched it 3 or 4 times now because it's amazing. And I'm a pretty big history buff. If I went back to school and wanted to get a degree in something different, I would go with history because I feel like history is just something I really love. And Alexander Hamilton was always kind of someone that I really enjoyed reading about because he's got a fascinating story. I won't go into his, crazy childhood and all that stuff, but suffice to say, the musical did a good job of explaining things. But like I said, Lin-Manuel Miranda took a lot of creative licensing with that. And so I kind of want to cover a little bit of the historical differences, fact versus fiction or fact versus Hollywood, however you want to call it. And then kind of get into really, like digging a little bit into the duel with Aaron Burr.
So are you going to do this via spoken word or, I mean, are you going to sing it?
I wish I had the pipes to sing it. I would try. But I'm not. So yeah, I can sit here and snap. I can put on a jazz beret and wear some sunglasses and try to do some spoken word, but I'm just going to read because I'm not that creative.
Gotcha.
So that being said, I'm going to get into my story here. Kind of the first thing that kind of jumped out at me when I first watched the movie, the play, however you want to phrase it, was how much he really pined for like the success, and he wanted that action when he was, under Washington, when he was, working for Washington, and he was kind of a glorified secretary in that role. And, like in the play, he pined for that success, but before that, he actually commanded troops before Yorktown, so he did a really good, he was a pretty successful military. He was a captain in the Revolutionary Army, and he saw action prior to the Yorktown being the big battle in the first act of the play. And so before that, he was actually really pivotal. I don't know if Chris, you're familiar, or anyone that's listening to familiar. I'm sure most people have heard about Washington's crossing of the Delaware, right?
Yes, that's the painting as well, right?
Exactly. Yeah, the painting where Washington's up on the top of the boat and they're rowing across in the middle of the night on Christmas Day. Well, Hamilton was actually really sick on Christmas Day, and they're like, he's not going to make it. Like, we'll just go without him. But he was able to kind of recover, and he's like, you know what? I'm getting on the boat. I'm crossing the Delaware with Washington. Like, this is going to be epic. So he crossed the river. He did the whole thing. He arrived in Trenton. He commanded. He was in charge of an artillery battalion. And as soon as they got to Trenton, the British and the Hessians were firing on them, and they were just like rocking their shit. Like, they were destroying everything. So Hamilton was like, you know what? Like, F this. Let's go, like, let's stop this. And so he took his battalion of artillery, he pushed them into the snow and just started firing on them, and he fucked their shit up.
So he went like full Rambo?
Essentially with artillery, like with grape shot and like cannonballs, he just started like firing. And there's a couple different like accounts of it. It varies because it's the 1700s. Not everyone had Twitter back then to tell us exactly what's going on. But like there was like British and Hessian troops that were trying to get like out of their tents and like the barracks that they had set up, and just like walk out and just like cannonballs like in the face, in the chest, and just getting like rocked by these cannonballs. So Hamilton was kind of a badass. And then after that, like the couple days later, they had the Battle of Princeton, and he was promoted to lieutenant colonel, and he was made one of Washington's aide-de-camps. Him and 2 other people were the aide-de-camps. One of them was John Lorenz, who we heard about in the play as well. And the other one was a person by the name of Marie-Joseph Paul Yves Roche Gilbert de Motier, also known as Marquis de Lafayette. He's French. He has like 18 last names. It's crazy. But anyway, so this is actually where those 3 men became friends. They didn't know each other prior to the Revolutionary War. They didn't meet in a bar and sing and talk about, they'll tell our story for the rest of the night. This is kind of where they met and they became friends. So the Battle of Yorktown, in the play, Hamilton's a badass, right? Like, this is where he turns the tide of the battle, and they do well, and all of a sudden Hamilton's like a superhero. In real life, it's actually cooler than the play kind of made it seem. Like, the play, they're sneaking around. They did kind of lead like a little bit of a night charge, but in reality, what they did is there were these 2 things called redoubts. There's Redoubt 10 and Redoubt 9. Redoubt 9 was handled by the French. Redoubt 10, a redoubt is basically a giant defensive structure that was set up by the British. And Washington's like, yo, go take that. Like, we need it. So Hamilton's like, bet, I'm on it. Let's go. So Hamilton took his men. They stormed this thing, and they're getting like pelted by artillery from the British. The just regular rifle fire. They run up, and basically they're at the bottom of this like a hill, basically, like a small hill. They're at the bottom. They're just getting shot. And Hamilton's like, you know what? Like, we're gonna die if we stay here. So he stands up in the middle of this battle, and he's like, men, like, follow me. Kind of like the whole, the charge that I read, like, come with me, like. So he stands up. He jumps over these like barricades. He runs through. He stabs the dude. Starts shooting everyone. His men follow him, and they charge, and they take over this redoubt. And they only lose 8 men. So they kill, hundreds of British soldiers. Hamilton kind of like gets this whole, military honors, and Washington's like, you're the man, thank you, like if it wasn't for this. And that's kind of where the battle turns, and the US or the American soldiers end up, kind of turning the tide of the revolution. So in the play, he's kind of like this, oh, I want to be a soldier, and he finally gets his shot. In reality, he was kind of a badass soldier, and he did really well.
So you could say he didn't throw away his shot?
He did not, and I'm actually getting to that. Thank you for bringing that up, because that's a huge point in the play, and I really like it. So thank you for spoiling my script 2 pages later. Another kind of cool thing is the whole thing with like the Schuyler sisters, with Angelica, Eliza, and Peggy. Eliza being his future wife, Angelica being Eliza's sister. They have a really flirtatious relationship. They meet, and like initially it's Alexander and Angelica, where they're like, ooh, like I love you, you're so cute. In reality, Angelica was already married. She had 2 kids, but when she met Hamilton, so she was already going back and forth between London. There was no crazy ball scene where they're fighting over each other. They did have a very flirtatious relationship that was evidenced by some of the letters that they would send back and forth. They would kind of like joke around with each other's grammar. Like, he would kind of like comment on how she's really bad at grammar, and so she would try to fix it. So they had this kind of a weird, sarcastic, flirtatious relationship.
Kind of a jerk, but she dug it.
Kind of a dick, but she was into it. You know what I mean? I guess he was kind of playing like the bad boy. And it was actually Angelica. If in the play, there's a scene where they sing about like when he writes her a letter where it's like, dearest, comma, Angelica. And in reality, it was reversed. She wrote the letter to Alexander, writing dearest, comma, Alexander, and he was like, hey, your grammar sucks, like you put the comma in the wrong spot. And she's like, no, it was on purpose.
So he's also kind of dense when it comes to the ladies.
But yeah. And the last bit on the Schuyler sisters, Philip Schuyler, their father, he had like 15 kids. Like, it wasn't up to the women to find men. There was plenty of men that lived in the family. He had sons that grew up to be adults, so like she wasn't as like needy as she needed to be, but I digress. She still killed it, did amazing with the song. The big kind of controversy in Hamilton's life was the Reynolds affair and all that stuff.
The Reynolds affair.
Yeah. Again, creative licensing from Miranda's point of view, I totally dug it. The way they told the story was great with like Madison and Jefferson and everything. In reality, Madison wasn't involved. Jefferson wasn't involved until later. Burr wasn't involved. It was actually James Monroe, the future president, was kind of like, yo, who's this guy like sleeping around with these women? Like, he's the Secretary of Treasury. Like, this isn't cool. So Monroe and 2 of the senators get together. They find out about it. They corner Hamilton. They try to bribe him. And Hamilton's like, no, like, you're not going to bribe me. I don't care, And then Monroe leaks all the papers to Jefferson. Jefferson starts publishing it just like in a play. And then Hamilton found out, and he starts calling Monroe like all these like terrible things in the newspaper. Everything just short of calling him a liar. Because calling someone a liar in the 1700s was like, like we're fighting, like we're throwing, like we're gonna throw hands, like
that's like the ultimate insult.
Yeah, it's like you're a liar, like we're, But Monroe got tired of like Hamilton calling him like a dog and like someone who's just trying to like usurp his power. And Monroe calls Hamilton a scoundrel, and he challenges him to a duel. And ironically, the person that intervened and stopped the duel was Aaron Burr. He's like, hey, like duels aren't cool, like you guys need to chill. So then Hamilton wrote a 95-page paper called Observations on Certain Documents, which later became known as the Reynolds pamphlet. So he's like, you know what, I'm going to write almost 100 pages on why I cheated on my wife and why it's okay.
I'm sure his wife loved it.
That's the best part. His wife, Eliza, didn't really even get mad at Hamilton. She got mad at Monroe for publishing it. She's like, yo, like, politicians are going to philander. Like, why are you going to call my husband out on it? And the whole scene in the play where she's like, I'm going to burn all my letters. I don't want to step out of the narrative. That actually happened, but it happened about 3 years prior to the Reynolds affair because she didn't want to be known as a historical figure. She didn't want people to remember her. She saw the burden that Martha Washington had and like the struggle she went through by being like a woman in the limelight and all this stuff. And she's like, I don't want that. Like, I'm going to step out, like, get out of here. So she actually burned all the papers. She got rid of all the letters and stuff that she said because she didn't want people to know like what her and Alexander were doing. So that was kind of that kind of a cool piece there. Moving on, there's a cool scene in the movie when John Adams gets elected president, and there's the cool little side part where King George sings a song about John Adams being the little man and how America was screwed. Which, by the way, by far a favorite character in the play is
he killed
King
it.
George.
Yeah.
He's amazing.
And from what I hear in the London version of the play, they love it, which is crazy because it's in the, I'm going to get it all wrong, and I'm sorry for all the history buffs out there. I believe it's like the Queen Victorian Theater, which is, like King George's granddaughter and Prince Harry and William's great-great-grandmother. And the king comes out and he does his whole spiel. And it's, direct lineage,
Yeah.
But they eat it up. They absolutely love the king there.
Yeah, there's a cool, I saw a thing with, I think, is it the Graham Norton show out in London or out in Britain?
Like that's like their Tonight Show kind of a thing.
Exactly, yeah. Lin-Manuel Miranda was on. He was talking about that when he went and saw it. He was standing next to Prince Harry and Meghan Markle, and he's like, this is their like 6-time great-grandfather that I'm like dissing right here. And he's like, I was terrified, but like they were laughing their ass off. And like people understood that, King George III became Mad King George. And so like he was kind of known to be like that, but he was really scared. So it's really cool like how they painted that.
Totally.
So there's a scene where Adams becomes president. He fires Hamilton, and Hamilton calls him a fat piece of shit. Adams never fired Hamilton. He resigned from politics after that. Kind of a cool story though is Hamilton wanted Washington to stay president for the rest of his life. He's like, no, like you're cool, just be president. Like I want to be Secretary of the Treasury the rest of our lives. Like let's just do that. And then Washington was like, nah, I'm cool. Probably the biggest thing that comes up with the play is everyone talking about the perception of most of the men and their stances on slavery. In the play, all the men are pretty staunchly opposed to slavery. In reality, they generally just didn't care. They were just kind of like, no, I don't like slavery. I don't really want this. In the beginning, they were kind of just like, I'm good. It doesn't really affect us. The only person that was really devout was like, no, was John Lorenz. And that was, played really well in the play where, he really wanted to raise an army of freed black men, and he wanted to get his 3,000 men, and he wanted to do all this. And tragically, he was killed after the war was over, like one of the last skirmishes in the war. But Alexander Hamilton, he had family members who were slave owners. His mother-in-law was a slave owner. He had extended family that were slave owners. And as a lawyer prior to the Revolutionary War, Hamilton assisted in, the transaction of his friends and family, like purchasing slaves and making sure everything was legit, and was legally sound. But by the time the Revolutionary War broke out, he did kind of start to see, hey, this is kind of wrong. And some more of the abolitionist, feelings and actions of his started coming out. He tried to recruit black soldiers and promising them their freedom to work for, the revolutionary, like in the war and like work for America. And like, hey, if you come fight for us, like we'll guarantee your freedom. So he really tried to step that up towards the end of the war. And then post-war, he really was strongly opposed to Southern interests with slavery and kind of where they were looking at. There's the cool sort of like the rap battle when him and Jefferson are kind of like battling back and forth. And he's talking about, like, we know where like your labor comes from and who's planting the seeds. He was really opposed to that. And he saw the hypocrisy between, we just fought this war for our independence, yet we still have all these people that are not free. And the other men featured prominently in the play, like Washington, Jefferson, Adams, Aaron Burr, they all owned slaves. The cool little side bit, I don't know if you heard this, where I forget the guy's name, the actor who played George Washington wanted to have like a little bit of like, like a nod to Washington having slaves. And like at the end, when Eliza's giving her spiel about, we'll be remembered by our actions, he kind of hangs his head because he's like, hey, we weren't able to address this, but it's kind of cool how he takes that little stance. Like,
yeah, that was Chris Jackson.
There we go. Yes.
phenomenal as George Washington.
Oh, I love, yeah. Their casting was fantastic. Like, yeah, like he killed it as Washington. David Diggs killed it as Lafayette and
Lafayette.
Jefferson. Like I loved, like, it's so amazing.
So yeah, it sounds like Hamilton's perspective back then, in the midst of it, in the midst of today, it's very controversial with the founding fathers owning slaves, and it
Exactly.
sounds like
Hmm.
Hamilton and a few others were very progressive in
Yeah.
views towards it back then, which would have been insane by today's standards.
Oh yeah. By today's standards, they're the most liberal. Like the people that, like, people are gonna lose their shit with this. But yeah, they were extremely progressive and extremely forward thinking to be like, like, hey, like, this isn't right to hold onto the person as property. And they tried really hard to make sure they could try to overturn some of that stuff in the capacity they had, because unfortunately, you know the Declaration of Independence said, all men are created equal. Well, they weren't, or they may be created equal, but they're not held equally. So they tried to do their part. um and now, moving on, we'll get into the meat and potatoes of this, and that's Mr. Aaron Burr versus Alexander Hamilton. Ding,
Dun
ding,
dun
ding.
dun.
Yeah. um so in this story, in the play, you see the whole, like the first act, it's, like, are you Aaron Burr, sir? They didn't meet in New York. They didn't meet that early on. They actually didn't really start to, they kind of had an idea. They were both in, the military. They both served under Washington in a little bit of a capacity, not as directly as Hamilton served under Washington, but Burr still saw some action. So they were both in the military. They had an idea of who they were, but they didn't really know each other until shortly after Burr won the New York Senate seat from Hamilton's father-in-law. Like it did happen in the play where the kid's like, that's Grandpa's seat. That did happen. Aaron Burr won the New York Senate seat, and that's when they kind of developed a rivalry, because Hamilton didn't really take too kindly to Burr ousting his father-in-law. In 1900, Burr ran for president. And kind of the way it worked is everyone ran for president under their party affiliation. So Jefferson
And
and
there were
Burr,
like 4 or 5 parties at that time, right?
yeah, they had tons. Yeah, we didn't have the Republicans and the Democrats. There were Democratic Republicans. They were Federalists. They
The
were
Whig Party.
Democrats. The Whig Party came in a little bit. Yeah, so like, Jefferson and Burr were both Democratic Republicans, and John Adams was running under the Federalist Party. Um, John Adams was up for re-election, and this is when kind of, they touch on it a little bit in the play, where when they touched on the part where Hamilton calls him a fat piece of shit, and they're like, oh, he took care of Adams. Kind of what happened, not really. Basically, Hamilton was like, hey, this guy doesn't really represent our Federalist ideals, and so it really fell to Aaron Burr and Jefferson for the seat of president. And there was actually an agreement between the electors where 73 of them were going to vote for Jefferson and 72 of them were going to vote for Aaron Burr. Well, someone screwed up and they both voted, and they got tied. So there was no majority winner. Someone voted for Burr instead of voting for John Adams. So it was 73 and 73. They were tied. So just like today, if there's a tie in the Electoral College, it goes to the House of Representatives.
And then they fight, right?
Yeah, they duel on the House floor. It's like AOC calling out that one guy that called her a
Yo ho.
So it got to the House of Representatives, and that's Alexander's territory. He's like, I'm an orator. I'm going to bury this dude. And he basically, was talking about why, I can swing some votes here. And it, basically made it so Jefferson was going to win the presidency. And Aaron Burr still became vice president, because back in the day, number one was president, number two was vice president. Which, side note, can you imagine if fuckface was president and Hillary Clinton was vice president? Like, could you imagine, like, the shit that would go down? Like, I would pay so much to watch that just to see them argue.
I would vote for that. That would get me out there to vote. That's amazing.
I'm pretty sure our country would still be doomed, but it would be amazing television for those 4 months before, Armageddon hit. Anyway, back to the story here. So in the play, this is kind of what sets off the duel. Is they say, like, you cost me the presidency, like, I hate you, I'm going to challenge you.
And that was in the play. That was the whole thing of if you don't stand for anything, what will you fall for?
Exactly. Yeah, that was kind of like the crescendo, the leading up to that, and that's kind of where it happened. In reality, it was about 4 years later where this happened. Prior to so basically, Burr becomes vice president. He runs out most of his term. Towards the end of his term in 1804, he's like, hey, I'm not going to reelect. I'm not going to re-up as vice president. Jefferson's going to go for another 4 years as president. They want someone else. So he's going to step down, and he's looking to run for governor of New York. Prior to that election in 1804, Hamilton attended a dinner with a doctor named Charles Cooper. Charles Cooper was a good friend of his father-in-law, and they got talking. And at the dinner, Hamilton made some comments regarding the Federalist Party's decision to go with Aaron Burr for the nomination for New York governor. I said earlier, Jefferson and Burr were both Democratic Republicans. When he left the vice presidency seat, they're like, hey, you want to come over to the Federalist side? And Burr's like, yo, let's do this. So Dr. Cooper, after the dinner, wrote a letter to Hamilton's father-in-law regarding his comments, claiming that the letter was very tame. He basically said, like, hey, Hamilton's talking shit about this dude. But the letter was tame compared to the comments in which Hamilton expressed a, quote, still more despicable opinion, end quote, of Burr during the dinner. So he's like, hey, he said a lot of stuff. I'm going to tell you, like, the easy stuff, but there's a lot worse. Burr went on to lose the election, and then Hamilton's father-in-law published the letter that Dr. Cooper sent him in the Albany Register. Aaron Burr saw it, and he demanded an apology from Hamilton. He wrote him a letter, and he's like, hey, I need to know if Dr. Cooper's claims that there was, quote, more despicable opinions, if that was true. Like, what did you say? Hamilton said, he wrote him a letter back, and he's like, I can't be held accountable for the interpretation of Dr. Cooper's words, but if he did interpret it a bad way, I don't blame him. Basically saying, like, hey, like
shots fired.
Yeah, he's kind of like, hey, like, I don't know if he took it the wrong way, he took it the wrong way, but I don't blame him because, you're kind of an asshole.
So this is pretty much like the first Twitter feud.
Honestly, it's exactly what it is. It's like an online, like, like, let's have a dick measuring contest, but we're going to write, 12,000 letters in a letter, or 12,000 words in a letter, and see what we can say. So Burr got mad. He wrote another letter asking for Hamilton to confirm or deny if more had been said to Dr. Cooper, and Hamilton responded by saying that he had, quote, no other answer to give other than that which had already been given. So basically, like, I said what I said. I'm not going to tell you anything more. He wanted Burr to, like, specifically challenge him on what he said, and Hamilton's like, I'm not going to give you a detailed response if you don't tell me anything. So eventually Burr's like, you know what, screw this. I'm going to issue a formal challenge to Hamilton, and Hamilton's like, all right, I got this. Like, let's duel. Previous to this, Hamilton had really refused to participate in the duel as a principal dueler. So that's the person that's actually, like, firing. He had been someone's second. The second is who, like, they make sure the paces are right. They try to negotiate peace. There's the whole bit in the movie, or in the play, where they're counting off the 10 different rules of dueling.
Yeah, the 10 steps, I think it's called, or something like that.
Yeah, which is actually really accurate. A lot of stuff that I've seen from historians are like, I'm using that when we cover dueling in, like, history. It's like, because they really go into depth in real, like, detail on what the seconds do and kind of what their jobs are. So Hamilton's never been the principal dueler, but he's done a lot of seconds. He was in there with Charles Lee, the whole thing when, John Lorenz shot Charles Lee after they were bad-mouthing Washington in the play, and then he gets kicked out of the army.
Yes.
Which never really happened. He didn't kick him out. He just got really mad at him. Washington's like, don't do that again. So, he didn't really want to participate, mainly because he's like, I'm a dad, I'm a husband, and I owe a lot of people money. If I die, my family's going to go bankrupt. So he's like, I don't want to do this. But Hamilton was also like, hey, I can't refuse this because I've been bad-mouthing this dude all, like, the last couple of months. Like, I've been telling him how bad of a person he is. And he's like, I can't recant that stuff because Burr is acting the way he is. Basically, like, I'm not going to take it back because Burr's being a little bitch about it. So there, Burr's like, we're going to fight. Let's duel, in a week. So Hamilton spent the intervening time between the challenge and the duel to settle his debts. And he kind of supposedly reconciled his religious beliefs. He was always kind of a pseudo-Christian. He believed in Christianity. But towards the end of his life, he really kind of got into an Episcopalian view. And so he really kind of brought up this whole, like, Episcopalian thing. And so he wrote a letter entitled Statement on the Impending Duel with Aaron Burr, in which he wrote he intended to throw away his shot in accordance with his moral and religious beliefs. So it's kind of funny that you were talking about throwing away his shot, because that was kind of his plan. He spent this whole play talking about how he's not going to throw away his shot. They'd be like, yeah, I'm going to throw away my shot.
Wow. It's just really crazy where, there's, like, a lot of little things in the story of Hamilton that kind of lead towards this ending.
Yeah.
Like the machine started and there was no turning back, and all things led to this. And he did throw away his shot.
Yes. And so on the fateful morning in July 11th, 1804, Hamilton and Burr met in a field in Weehawken, New Jersey. It's just outside New York, it's just across the river. Dueling is illegal in both the state of New Jersey and the state of New York, but they agree that because New Jersey prosecutes murder more leniently than New York, they would do the duel in New Jersey. I feel like that's kind of similar. New Jersey gets away with a lot of shit, where in New York, they're like, nah, we're going to do that.
Yeah, I mean, even today, they can do a
Yeah,
lot in New Jersey.
exactly. And then coincidentally, they did mention this in the play. It's also in the same, it's not the exact same field, but it's a similar area in Weehawken where Hamilton's son Philip was killed in a duel just 3 years prior to that.
That's insane.
So per the dueling, we talked about the 10 steps. The seconds got together. They tried to negotiate. Nothing worked. So they drew the lots out of the hat. So basically they say, we're going to pick out of the hat. Whoever wins gets to choose like what side, if they want to be on the right, the left, north, south, how they get to pick where they want to stand. And the other person takes their 10 paces from that. Hamilton won the draw, but he chose the north side of the field, which faced the river, right? The sun's coming up, the river's behind Burr, and so he's going to be staring into a glare. Most historians agree that it was an odd choice because Hamilton was a renowned military man. He was known for his marksmanship, and the fact that he'd be facing the water and having all this glare in his eyes, it doesn't make sense, and which also leads them to believe that he did that purposely because he was already planning on throwing away his shot. So they're getting ready to square up. Hamilton's like, whoa, time out. Like, I need to put my glasses on. There's a glare. I can't see. Right. And again, they touch on this in the play where he's like, Hamilton's wearing his glasses like he's a marksman. Hamilton put on his glasses. He then resighted his gun. He checked to make sure everything was working and he could see everything. And this is where the speculation comes in, where historians think that Burr took this as a sign that Hamilton wanted to kill him because he was going to take these extra steps. He's going to look at it and say, hey, why else is he going to do all this stuff unless he wanted to murder me? So now the shot, right? We don't really know exactly what happened because per the rules, the seconds turn their backs. They can't actually see what's happening because if they see what's happening, they're an accessory to murder. They're watching someone be murdered. They're not stopping it. They can be convicted of it. So to protect that, the seconds turn their back. They don't look to see what happened. All the first-hand accounts do agree that there were 2 shots fired. We know that one shot hit the trees above the head of Aaron Burr and broke some of the branches above his head, and the other one hit Alexander Hamilton in the ribs. Historians believe that Hamilton did indeed throw away his shot by wasting it and shooting it up in the air above Aaron Burr. The weird thing about that is if Hamilton did intend to throw away his shot in such a way, tradition dictates that he should have shot into the ground. Basically, like, I'm not going to shoot you, I'm going to shoot the ground. This would signal to Burr that he doesn't intend any harm. He understands he was in the wrong, and he's conceding his point. And Burr would have taken that as his dispute being settled. But since Hamilton shot in the air, Burr was then justifiably able to turn around and say, hey, he shot at me, I'm going to shoot him back. So therefore, if he hit him, he could say, like, I was justified in shooting him because he tried to kill me.
See, that's the crazy part for me, right? So you take your paces, you turn and face each other. But right when you turn and face each other is when you shoot, right?
So that's the other thing. Like, Hollywood kind of skews that a little bit. One of the other practices is like the Old West. So like in the 1800s is when they did the turn 10 paces, turn and fire. The problem is that some people had shorter steps, some people had longer steps. There was no fair, quote unquote, fair way to look at this and say, okay, how do we do this? What they would do is someone would either drop like a handkerchief or one of the seconds would count 1, 2, 3, fire. So they believe that they kind of just agreed, like they're like, okay, because none of the seconds said we didn't drop anything, we didn't do anything. They turned their 10 paces, they were staring at each other. We turned our backs, we heard 2 gunshots fire. So no one really knows who shot first, what happened. Again, they believe that Hamilton shot above Burr, and then Burr responded in kind.
Gotcha. Because it just seems very split second to register that your opponent is shooting at the ground.
Exactly. Yeah, it's very difficult, and that's kind of there's some stuff. If you look into like the rule, there's like a whole guideline you can find online on how to duel or like how the duels used to happen. And there's some people that say you would have because each carrying case you'd carry 2 pistols, right? You have 1 shot in each. And the thought was everyone in the beginning would shoot the ground the first time, and that would just let everyone know that they were ready. And they would take their second pistol, and then they would start the shooting. But there's really no like clear cut like, okay, this is what happens, because until the invention of gunpowder, everyone did dueling by swords. They would sword play. That's how they would they would do their duels. So there wasn't really a necessarily like cut in stone, this is how we duel with pistols, and so everyone kind of had their own way of doing it. um and we just don't know, because the seconds, they just refuse to talk about it after this. So after the shots were fired, Hamilton collapses almost immediately. The bullet is believed to hit him in like his third rib, and it shattered the rib. It went through, it lacerated his liver, it cut through his diaphragm. He had lots of internal bleeding, a lot of organ damage. When Burr shot him, like Aaron Burr registered the shot, right? And he saw that he hit him. He actually tried to run over and like check on Hamilton, but his second was like, no, 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 like we got to get out of here. Like, you know, this is not legal. Like people know that this is an area known for dueling. So whenever they hear shots fired, like people come up to investigate. Like we can't be here when we're seen. So his second rushes him into the boat. Hamilton's carried away by his second and a physician he had waiting for him in the boat. They're taken across the river to a family friend, and the physician attends to him. His wife Eliza and all their children are able to come see Hamilton. During the play, it looks like they separate after Philip dies and all this stuff. In reality, Eliza's been with them the whole time. She understands like everything that happened. They're still together. They love each other. Everything's great. So Eliza shows up with her children. They're able to see Hamilton. He remains conscious in and out for most of the day. At times he'll come out of unconsciousness and he'll check with the doctor, and he's like, "Hey, is my bullet still loaded? Like I didn't fire my gun. Like make sure the bullet's still there. I want people to know the bullet's still there." And they'd be like no, like Alexander, like it's shot, like it's gone. This is another thing that historians kind of there's a couple of historians and a biographer who actually wrote a book that says he believes Aaron Burr shot first, and he shot Hamilton, and then as Hamilton, because the bullet punctured his liver, his diaphragm, and it ended up lodging in the lumbar vertebrae, they think that he became he got paralyzed, and as he was falling, he shot, and that's what shot over the tree. So it's a kind of conflicting stories here. But then with these things where he's talking to the doctor, where he's regaining consciousness, people think that he never intended to fire, and that it was an involuntary shot that came out of his gun.
It just literally a jerk reaction from the impact and the damage.
Exactly. Unfortunately, it's one of those things we'll never know. Hamilton did go on. So the duel started. It was about 7 a.m. on July 11th. He made it until 2 p.m. on July 12th when he passed away. He was surrounded by his family and friends. Just like in the play, Eliza did like almost immediately went into like protection mode, and she's like, you know what, I'm going to preserve Alexander's legacy. I want people to know he was a good man. He wasn't this person that just kind of philandered around and ended up getting killed. So she started cataloging all of his letters and papers. She settled all of his debts. She sold their family home. She settled everything. They were able to be, not super wealthy, but they were able to live, so they had like 9 children. They were able to live comfortably for the rest of her life. She was instrumental in having Congress publish all of Hamilton's letters and kind of making it a national thing. They published all 51 of his Federalist Papers. And just like in the play, she started an orphanage in New York. It's still in operation to this day. And she lived to be 97 years old, which in the 1800s is amazing.
Yeah, that's pretty phenomenal.
Yeah, she died in 1854. She outlived Alexander Hamilton by 50 years. Mr. Burr was charged with murder in both New York and New Jersey, but in both states, the charges were dropped because, let's face it, he's the vice president of the United States. If Dick Cheney can shoot someone in the face and get away with it, I'm pretty sure this guy could get away with murdering someone in the 1700s. He returned to his role as vice president. Hey, Thomas, how's it going? Like, another day in the life of the vice president. He served the remainder of his term. When he left, he kind of started moving out west. He wanted to look into like getting some land and, buying up some land and selling it out, and he decided that when Thomas Jefferson purchased a bunch of land with the Louisiana Purchase, he's like, you know what, this seems like a good place for a new country. So he picked a couple military men and he's like, let's start a new independent empire in the United States. Problem is, the 2 people he picked were chicken shits, and they're like, nah, fuck this, like, we're not doing it. So they ratted him out to Jefferson. So Jefferson arrested him, and they tried him for treason. He wasn't convicted because he was a former vice president, but Thomas Jefferson was like, yo, like, you can't ever work in politics again, like, you're done. His reputation would never be the same, and he would kind of live out his life in relative obscurity until his death in 1836. A little quick side note on Aaron Burr. Prior to his death, he married a woman named Eliza Jamel. Eliza Jamel was a former prostitute who married a man. Well, common law married a man. He died. She inherited some money. She rose to even more significant wealth. She married a very wealthy merchant who traveled between the United States and London and France. He died, so she inherited all of his money. So she's like, hey, I'm really wealthy. I'm going to marry this man, Aaron Burr, who's 77 years old and's got, equivalent to today's millions of dollars. So she married a 77-year-old former politician. But, Aaron Burr didn't really make the best choices. And so all of his land that he had bought up was being sucked dry because, there's really no one out there to be working in the West. So after 4 months, she's like, you know what? I'm good. I'm going to divorce this man. So she filed for divorce 4 months after getting married. The day she filed for divorce, Burr suffered a stroke and was rendered immobile. The divorce, and then so he was immobile for the rest of his life. The divorce was officially finalized on September 14th, 1836. You know what happened on September 14th, 1836?
September 14th, Aaron Burr died?
Exactly. His divorce finalized, he kicked the bucket. And who was the lawyer who handled the divorce papers, you might add, and the proceedings at Eliza, which is also Alexander Hamilton's wife name, so kind of weird, right? Eliza, he married an Eliza.
There's a little poeticness to it.
So it gets better. Who was the lawyer who handled the divorce papers for Eliza?
It's got to be one of Alexander's kids.
Alexander Hamilton Jr.
Was it really a junior? Because that's amazing.
It was Alexander Hamilton Jr. He became a lawyer. He followed in his father's footsteps, and was able to serve divorce papers to the man who killed his dad.
That's got to be weird.
And that, my listeners, is the true story of Alexander Hamilton.
That, what's great about Alexander Hamilton is, the resurgent of how important he actually was.
Yeah.
Now, right, through Lin-Manuel Miranda. But then before that, it was like 94. There was like the first Got Milk commercial.
Yep.
And it was like the guy ate a spoonful of peanut butter. He had to answer a radio thing like, who shot Alexander Hamilton?
He was working at the Smithsonian. Yeah.
Yeah. And he just couldn't say it.
Mm-hmm.
And that was kind of the last reference to Alexander Hamilton. Like most
That's
people
what people knew him from.
Yeah. They didn't even realize he was the founding father on the $10 bill.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
So,
they didn't know what. Yeah, they didn't recognize that he was the founding father. Didn't know that he was killed by a sitting vice president. It's insane.
Yeah, it's a completely insane story, and it's really great to see it resurfacing and actually getting the notoriety and respect that somebody like Alexander Hamilton really deserves.
Oh yeah, definitely. Like I said, growing up like a history buff, like it was always like such a cool story, and I'm glad that he is getting sort of that spotlight and people are seeing what's going on and how he affected today's, kind of country, the ideas he had and the things he fought for are things that we're still, unfortunately, still kind of fighting for. But, he was very progressive and really wanted to do better.
Yeah. Yeah, that's awesome. Excellent coverage. And then, just one more thing on the play that was one of those like little nods, how you're mentioning Chris Jackson kind of looks down in shame when they talk about slavery.
Uh-huh.
So at the very end of the show, when Eliza looks out over the audience in the play, it's Philippa Sue, I believe.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And then she just kind of looks around and then screams. Have you heard the fan theory on that?
The one where they're saying that they think it's her, like her character Eliza, seeing the kind of breaking the fourth wall and seeing the audience and seeing that they did see the story and they'll live on to see what she did.
Yeah, I'm not crying. You're crying. No, I thought that was a very beautiful, touching moment because now all of a sudden, all of these lineages, all these families are kind of resurrected.
Oh yeah, definitely.
So yeah, man, awesome job. That was a great topic.
Thank you.
So we're going to move on to our next subject, which we're calling Banter with the Beardsleys. With that, what we're going to do is we're going to look to you guys for a random conversation to talk about. Neither one of us will really have anything prepared. Whoever pretty much chooses this one, they'll have a rough idea, but nothing set in stone, no research, nothing like that. So for today, since we're a brand new little baby show, we don't really have the draw that we need to make this a full fun thing. So we're going to the interwebs and a random conversation generator, which I think it's actually going to be kind of a fun one. So I found two. Which one would you like? Would you like number one or number two?
Considering I just had a lot of cheese, let's go with number two.
I thought you might pick number two.
Oh,
Number two. If you could have any superpower, what would it be?
oh man, that's really tough. I feel like that's something everyone talks about and everyone wants to think about, and like
I mean, it always comes down to two. It comes down to flight and invisibility.
exactly. I was just gonna say, yeah, either want to be able to fly or be invisible.
That's what it always boils down to. But what if you can't pick those? What if those are taken by everybody
Okay,
else?
so we take those out.
Yeah.
Um, that's a good. I don't know. It's gotta be. Is it like a physical superpower, right, or like something that's tangible, like not like just have thousands of dollars and be like Batman? My superpower is to be rich.
I mean, although that's technically genetic, I don't think I don't think that one counts.
Okay. I will go with. Fuck, man, that's hard.
It's a good one.
Because the only one that's popping in my head is to be really strong, but like I feel like I'm already kind of strong, and like super strength it doesn't really like unless I'm going to be pulling cars off of people. Which who knows if the apocalypse comes, maybe we'll need that.
I mean, yeah, you could start your own moving company.
Yeah, Tyler Moving Company Incorporated. Can I go with time travel? Is that a superpower? Can I have time travel?
Can you list a character who has that?
Doc Brown from Back to the Future.
Well, technically, it's the DeLorean.
Okay, whatever. He created the DeLorean.
He didn't create the DeLorean.
Okay, yeah, DeLorean created the DeLorean. He created the time machine inside of the DeLorean.
It was a flux capacitor.
Yeah.
Everybody knows.
Okay, fine. Since that's not a superpower, I'm pretty sure Batman or Superman spun around the world in reverse time, but whatever. I saw that movie. I saw it. Christopher Reeves did it.
Best Superman, by the way. I don't care. Henry Cavill's great. Don't get me wrong. But
I was
Christopher
like, I
Reeve,
fucking love Henry Cavill.
he's great. I'm not knocking him, but like Christopher Reeve is Superman.
Maybe.
Like Michael Keaton is Batman.
I don't know. Val Kilmer played a really good Batman.
I mean,
I couldn't get to that with a straight face. I love Val Kilmer. I'm sorry, but yeah, I could. He played a great Bruce Wayne, but he was a terrible Batman.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and there's George Clooney, who's just dreamy.
Oh, I love George.
Oh, George. This has been the George Clooney corner of the podcast. I'm just gonna go with strength because I can't think of anything else. I just want to be really strong and just like walk around like flex on them hoes.
But I mean, I don't think you get buff. I think you just get strength.
That's fine. I don't care.
All
if
right.
I can lift a car off a woman, she's gonna be impressed.
She'll probably be dead if the car's on top of her, but that's still all right.
Minor
That's fair.
details. Details.
I think I would probably have to go. I don't know where it is on the superpower spectrum, but I'd go full Dr. Manhattan.
You want to walk around with the giant penis hanging around covered in blue?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, that works.
No,
Oh. Time out. Fuck that. Doctor Strange can time travel.
Okay, Doctor Strange time travel fair.
I
That's fair.
call time travel.
I mean, it's technically not time travel. He's jumping timelines, but
It's okay. Whatever. If I can go back and kill Hitler, that's all I want.
okay, fair. But then that's a whole nother. That's
I know.
a whole
We're not.
subject.
Yeah, that's a whole other subject. Yeah, I know. Well, that's episode like 7.
Yeah. Okay. So I won't go with Dr. Manhattan because he's just kind of super everything,
Yeah.
and there's not like an exact power. But
Hmm.
I would go with teleportation.
That's good. I like that.
Yeah, I'm like very antisocial and
And anti-walking movie.
very anti-walking. That's why God created cars so we don't have to.
I'm pretty sure that was Henry Ford, but whatever.
Same guy. It might be. I wasn't around. It could have been.
You weren't there.
But yeah, so like if I'm ever in a situation where I'm just like, there's just too many people, I'm over this, I can just go home.
Oh, that's fair.
And I kind of like that. And then flip side, like
Oh, go ahead.
I would say, like, I'm a big Disney guy. I love going to Disneyland, but it's like an hour. And
oh no, you have to drive a whole hour. I have to drive 3 hours, asshole.
Well, that's your fault.
Yes.
Saying. So yeah, I would go with teleportation just to make traveling easier.
That would be nice.
Yeah, I love, like, I've always wanted to go to Ireland. I could just go to Ireland and then, drink a Guinness and then come home.
Yeah, have a pint and come home, call it a day.
Yeah, get some like authentic fish and chips, and then I'm solid.
Nice. Yeah. So like instead of like getting mad and taking your ball and going home, like I'm taking my body and going home. Boop. Or whatever sound you would make when you teleport. I don't know what sound teleportation makes.
I don't know how it works. I was trying to think of Star Trek when they like
Yeah.
beam up.
Oh yeah, it just kind of makes that like sound.
So yeah, I think I'm going teleportation, which is kind of like invisibility because you get all the same
Innocent. Yeah.
perks, right?
Mhm.
Like you could just be in a bank vault and then vanish. So
All right.
yeah, I'm gonna say that teleportation is the underrated superpower you can get, and I think it's one of the best. I'm sticking with it. All
All
right.
right. So now I want to hear about this. What was it? Something that happened in American history?
It's an event that occurred in American history. Mine's not going to be as long or as in depth as yours, just because of the subject matter, the criteria, and the federal government.
Restrictions on the law.
There's not a lot available, and we'll get into why in a second.
All right.
So
I'm excited.
this one, it's one of those things that I learned about it years ago, and I can never forget it.
Mm.
And this is my chance to mouth vomit it on other people.
Nice.
It also has to do with one of my phobias.
Uh-oh.
So, in full disclosure, I think it's Tyler. I have a big one, which is spiders,
Yep.
and this has nothing to do with the Great American Spider Invasion of 1846,
Okay.
which isn't real, thank God.
I was like, that doesn't sound real.
I'm also afraid of power outages, and I don't know why. I think it's because, like, I've watched a lot of horror movies. I think we've probably watched all of them,
Oh yeah, definitely.
like everything.
Mhm.
And whenever something bad happens, the power goes out.
Yep.
And so I think it just carried over to my real life. And now I get a little nervous when the lights go out.
All right. Fair enough.
Yeah. And then the last thing is UFOs.
Oh.
For whatever reason, the idea of being abducted by an alien just terrifies the hell out of me. And granted, it's probably not like a thing that happens all that often, but the possibility of it is what freaks me out.
You're just saying you don't want to be probed.
I'm down with the probing, but just ask me.
All right. So we have the ground rules for your phobias. Which
Okay.
of your 3 phobias does this cover?
So we're gonna get into aliens.
Ooh, aliens.
So the one thing most of us have probably heard about is the Roswell incident, and not Roswell like the show, Roswell like what the show was, I think,
Yeah.
based on. I've actually never seen Roswell.
Same. I've never seen either. I know of Roswell and the supposed alien landing or crash, whatever it was, in New Mexico back in the 50s.
Exactly. It was actually on July 8th, 1947.
All right.
And it started in the newspaper. It was the Roswell Daily Record. They published on its front page in giant, big block letters, RAAF captures flying saucer on the ranch in the Roswell region. This is going to lead into my topic. So I think it's important that we kind of cover what happened in 1947, because we are going to use your superpower and we're going to time travel just a little
Yayo.
bit.
Sweet.
See how I tied it all in? Very proud. There's underneath the headline, it says the intelligence office of the 509th Bombardment Group at Roswell Army Airfield announced at noon today that the field has come into possession of a flying saucer. So that is the United States government confirming with the press that they actually possessed a flying saucer
They
that
got
was
something.
crashed.
Yeah. Interesting.
And this is on, again, July 8th. Army Major J.A. Marcel, who was an intelligence officer, he said the disc was recovered on a ranch in the Roswell vicinity after an unidentified rancher had notified Sheriff Geo Wilcox, because that is the ultimate old-timey name, that he had found the instrument on his premises. Major Marcel and a detail from his department went to the ranch and recovered the disc, it was stated in the newspaper.
Wow. Okay.
After the intelligence officer had inspected the instrument, it was flown to higher headquarters. Now, that's just the basis of what happened at Roswell. This is where it gets kind of fun. The article continues. Mr. and Mrs. Dan Wilmot, again, great old-timey name, apparently were the only persons in Roswell who seen what they thought was a flying disc. They were sitting on the porch at 105 South Penn last Wednesday night, which is a small little farm community outside of Roswell. Wednesday night at about 10 o'clock, when a large glowing object zoomed out of the sky from the southeast, going northwesterly, directed at a high rate of speed. Wilmot called Mrs. Wilmot's attention to it, and both ran down into the yard to watch. It was in sight less than a minute, perhaps 40 to 50 seconds, Wilmot estimated. Wilmot said that it appeared to him to be about 1,500 feet high and going fast.
How the hell did he figure that? How do you measure 1,500 feet?
Because his name is Mr. Wilmot. He's
He
sitting
sounds
on
like
a
a science
porch.
teacher. Okay,
Yeah.
perfect. Sorry, continue.
I mean, it's just one of those things you can only imagine somebody sitting on a porch at 10 o'clock at night drinking lemonade would say.
That's true. Yeah.
And it technically probably was. I mean, it's mid-July, early July in
Oh yeah, I'm sure.
New
Yeah.
Mexico.
In New Mexico, yeah, it's hot as balls.
Yeah, and there's nothing else to do but to sit on the porch and drink lemonade. Wilmot said it appeared to be about 1,500 feet high and going fast. He estimated between 400 and 500 miles per hour, which is really strange considering in 1947, nothing really went that
Yeah.
fast.
Yeah, like that's a weird speed to understand, like the relativeness of that.
Yeah, to get a concept of. I mean, I think they had like a fighter jet, and I don't know if it hit 400 to 500 miles per hour. In appearance, it looked oval in shape, like two inverted saucers, kind of like if you're going to make a little clamshell with two little saucer plates.
Right.
The entire body glowed as though light were shining through it from the inside. Though not like it would inside. That was something he very much wanted to clarify. I think he was referring to the fact that the light wasn't coming from the bottom. It was just kind of emanating light through the body of this aircraft.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Okay. Like it wasn't beaming down light. It was just light in the aircraft.
Yeah, it was like kind of like the light was going through the particles of the craft.
Got it. Okay.
And this is from the sheriff of Roswell. Wilmot, who is one of the most respected and reliable citizens in town, kept the story to himself, hoping that someone else would come out and tell about having seen this, but finally decided today that he would go ahead and talk about it.
Damn.
So he's a reliable source. It's a strange freak thing, and I think just by the details, I think he overcompensated with the description just because he's trying to convey what he saw.
Yeah, like the overall, like the strangeness of it was like, this is so crazy, like I can't even comprehend.
And so here's where it gets fun. The very next day, July 9th, 1947. So on July 8th, the government and the newspaper went ahead and published an article saying how we have a flying saucer.
Yeah.
Right. So on July 9th, 1947, the government was all over the scene. They released a new article saying it was just a weather balloon with a bunch of test equipment on it.
Of course.
Which led me to two things. One, that's complete BS. There are way too many people who've come out since the incident from the government that have had firsthand accounts, which we're not going to get into right now because that's not the topic here.
Yeah.
Number two, the government literally in the last about a month ago and again this week, the government just came out and said we've encountered off-world vehicles not made on this earth.
Mm-hmm.
So if the government in 2020 is saying that, oh yeah, UFOs totally legit, why wouldn't they have been legit in 1947?
Because there wasn't a pandemic and the universe trying to kill us in the year 2020.
Exactly. So they're prepping us for Armageddon.
Exactly.
So now that we know that the government has been keeping UFOs secret, let's hop off our... I actually want to change this now because in my script I say let's hop in our off-world vehicle not made on this earth. Let's use our new superpower of time travel.
Nice.
So you tied it in. We're back.
Uh-huh.
And let's go back to 1897. This one is a fun one. So on April 19th, 1897, an article in the Dallas Morning News described a UFO crash. The UFO is said to have hit a windmill on the property of a judge, right? Again, credible witness of Judge J.S. Proctor 2 days earlier at around 6 a.m. Central Time, resulting in its crash. The pilot, who is reported to be, and I quote, not of this world and a Martian.
Oh, okay.
According to a reported Army Signal Service officer named T.J. Weems from nearby Fort Worth. So this Martian creature did not survive the crash and was buried with Christian rites by a traveling pastor named William Russell Tabor at a nearby Aurora cemetery.
What?
Yes.
So there's some pastor driving by like, oh, this alien that we've never seen needs to get buried.
Yeah, I think so.
All right.
What I've gathered is back in that time frame, it was not a lot happening anywhere. So a lot of preachers would go around town to town and either preach, and because they were genuine, preachers, or they would preach and try and sell snake oil, essentially.
Yes.
So this guy just happened to be driving in town. The cemetery at Aurora Cemetery contains a historical Texas commission marking the moment that this alien was buried. Now, you might say, well, what happened with the UFO? If it hit the windmill and crashed, it's got to be somewhere, right?
Yeah.
Reportedly, wreckage from the crash was dumped into a nearby well located under the damaged windmill, while some ended up with the alien in the grave. Adding to the mystery was the story of Mr. Brawley Oates, which is also a fantastic old-timey name.
Oh, yeah. Hell yeah.
So Mr. Brawley Oates, who had a big flappy mustache, I can't confirm that, but he has to. It's like a birthright.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
He purchased Judge Proctor's property around 1935. Oates cleaned out the debris from the well in order to use it as a water source, but later developed an extreme severe case of arthritis, which he claimed to be the result of contaminated water from the wreckage dumped into the well.
That would do it. It's either that or you get some sort of superpower.
Yeah, maybe he's the time traveler. Boom. As a result, Oates sealed up the well with a concrete slab and placed an outbuilding on top of the slab.
Okay.
So he sealed everything up. Now, this sounds too good to be true, right?
Yes.
I completely agree. And so did Etta Pegs. I'm going to say that name wrong, but I'm just going to call her Etta Pegs.
Pegs, like she pegs, like you want to get pegged?
Like almost like Pegasus. It's Pegues, Etta Pegs.
Oh, okay.
In 1980, Time magazine did an interview with Etta. At that time, she was 86 years old and a resident from Aurora who claimed that Hayden had fabricated the entire story, stating that Hayden wrote it as a joke and to bring interest into Aurora. So it was all PR.
Yeah.
She says, and I quote, "The railroad bypassed us and the town was dying." Pegs further claimed that Judge Proctor never actually even operated a windmill on his property. A statement later disputed in an episode of UFO Hunters on the History Network, which found what they claimed to be the base of a wooden water pump tower constructed around the well. So the hoax, in fact, was a hoax of its own.
Interesting. It was hoaxception.
It was like 5 layers of hoax.
Interesting. Okay.
So MUFON, which, if you don't know, it's the Mutual UFO Network, which is worldwide now, and it's pretty interesting, but we'll get into that one later as well. They uncovered 2 new eyewitnesses to the crash. Mary Evans, who was 15 at the time, told of how her parents went to the crash site. They forbade her from going, and the discovery of the alien body. Charlie Stevens, who was 10 years old at the time, he saw the airship trailing smoke as it headed north towards Aurora. He wanted to see what happened, but his father made him finish his chores because, again, it's, New Mexico in 1947 or 1897.
Yeah. I thought they were in Texas.
You're right.
Okay, sorry.
Aurora, Texas. You're absolutely right. So what you have to do your chores because Pa said do your chores before you go see the alien body.
Or you get whooped.
You get the lashings.
Go cut me a switch.
So he told how his father went down the next day and saw wreckage from the crash.
Okay.
MUFON then investigated the Aurora Cemetery and uncovered a grave marker that appeared to show a flying saucer of some sort, as well as readings from its metal detector.
Oh, okay.
Now this is weird, right? So if hypothetically there's something in that grave, you would want it to be discovered, right? You want to dig this thing up.
Oh yeah, definitely.
So MUFON asked for permission to exhume the site, but the Cemetery Association declined permission. After the MUFON investigation, the marker mysteriously disappeared from the cemetery and a 3-inch pipe was placed into the ground.
What the fuck?
For the sole purpose of MUFON's metal detectors no longer picking up a proper signal. MUFON's report eventually stated that the evidence was inconclusive but did not rule out the possibility of a hoax. The episode featured an interview with Mayor Brammer who discussed the town's tragic history, and it goes on to talk about how a lot of people ended up getting radiation poisoning from the town's water supply, the natural well that was underneath the town.
Yeah.
And that's essentially where it all ends. The last full report on this was done in 1994 for a documentary on the History Channel, but it's just very interesting to know that although Roswell happened in 1947, it was not the first time a UFO was widely publicized and reported on in the United States.
Wow, yeah, that's crazy.
So is it all a hoax? I don't know. I honestly, I would think if something happened in a small town in the late 1800s, you're going to put it in the paper.
Yeah.
Like you're not just going to make up fake stuff because then they're going to go after the mayor for being crazy. The sheriff is going to get in trouble. Politically, hoaxing that in 1897 would not be a good call.
Yeah, definitely.
So yeah, that's my topic. It didn't have a lot to go off of, strictly for the fact that it was a very long time ago, and back then they kind of looked down on UFO stories just as much as they do today.
Oh yeah.
But it's just very interesting that all of this has happened before, and it'll happen again.
Yeah, that's crazy. I mean, especially, I don't know, I feel like people from that time period, not that they're more trustworthy, because, you know, like you're saying, there's people that sell snake oil, and people are going to have some, you know, they're going to be full of shit wherever you go. But I don't know. I just feel like that time, like there's so much more stuff to do. They had to like work their land, and they had to do all this stuff to make a living, that why would they spend this much time to do a hoax? And, you know, yeah, it's going to bring traffic into like the city, but what if it doesn't work? Like, he spent all that time and basically just like damned his family and everything for trying to create this hoax. Like, I don't know. I feel like I want to believe
The truth is out there.
Yeah, it's like, I just don't. I feel like, yeah, like, why would you go through that much effort to fake something like that? You know?
Exactly. You're gonna, ruin your political career. You're gonna ruin your family.
Yeah,
It's just, it wouldn't be worth it back then.
yeah. You had too much at stake. Like, you were like the sole breadwinner, like literally, you know, like making food and, you know, growing your supplies. That why would you waste that time?
Exactly. Especially when he shut down his well.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, like, it's your water source. Like, no, like that's not okay.
Yeah, you need that water.
Yeah.
So so that's my story, and
Nice.
I hope you liked it. It was one thing that I learned that years ago, and I've always tried to find more information, and sadly there just isn't.
It's the government, I tell you, man.
That's what it is. Until now, for whatever reason.
Someone get Agent Mulder on the phone.
I can't say that because of copyright strike.
That's all we get.
So yeah, that was our episode.
Yeah, hope you, anyone that's listening to this, I hope you're listening to this. Please listen to this. If you're listening, I hope you enjoyed it. Let us know how we did. If you have feedback, comments, questions, if you have if you have something like that yourself, you've seen the UFO, you've heard the story, or you have critiques on Alexander Hamilton, or somehow something that's related to Hamilton, let us know. Shoot us a message, and we can talk about it on the show.
Absolutely. And, for all your questions, comments, concerns, and particularly grievances, you can find us at the Hamburglar. And then for all the good stuff, you can message me at the Christopher Alton.
Yes, I will gladly send all your hate mail into the junk folder. But no, I mean, probably in the next day or two, I'm going to try to get some social media up for us. So by the next time you hear us, hopefully we will have some information where you can actually find us. And then you can send good, bad, negative, whatever you want to send us. You can find a social media outlet to send it to, and not hopefully spam us with direct messages.
I love spam messages because it makes me feel important. So that's cool. You can send me messages. But yeah, thank you so much for listening. Beard strong, my friends. That's it, folks. We will talk to you next week.